Hi everybody. Just want to thank Mina and South Carolina for having me today. It's such a thrill to be able to get to talk to young people, especially students. So thanks so much for having me today. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about myself and about my work. I hope it's not too boring. My name is TJ Harley. I'm the president and creative director, daycare specialist, janitor, cook at Harley Creative, a little design shop I started back in 2012. I hope I don't offend any of you with what I'm about to say next, but I am a 2001 Clemson graduate. I'm gonna give you a little disclaimer right now. There's some Clemson material coming a little bit later. Okay, so if you're sensitive to that sort of thing, I apologize. I was born in New York to two loving, wonderful parents. Got my art career started pretty early, as you can see from this photo. When I was growing up, I had a lot of friends who were into comics and superheroes. I wasn't. I was a little bit more into sports as a kid, and I played baseball in high school, or growing up and through high school. That's me right there playing Little League in jeans. That's how we rolled back in 1983. No tackle twill embroidered jerseys or MLB logos, just a blue mesh hat and a t-shirt. That's about all we got. And when I was a kid, we would get these small little magazines called TV Guide. I don't know how many of you are familiar with TV Guide, but most of you probably, we have a couple of people that know what TV Guide is. This was back when, you had to actually watch the show that was on TV when it was on. There were no DVRs, there were no VCRs were still kind of new at the time. So, but in these magazines back in, the mid to late 80s, they would have these little call outs of what football games would be on TV that week. And they'd have these little like football helmet icons, and they would have each team's roster on it. And I can just remember like being completely fascinated by these for some reason, and just couldn't wait until, the TV Guide would come each week, so I could see what helmets were on this little page. And when I think back on it, that was kind of my first real interest in sports logos, even though I didn't realize it at the time. And I started to develop this obsession with football helmets. They would put these cheesy football graphics on the games in the 80s, and I just loved it. I got I loved the New York Jets as a kid, and my parents got me this Jets helmet when I was for Christmas one year. This is my grandpa interviewing me one Christmas about my new uniform. So I started drawing football helmets when I was a kid, and they got a little better, and I would just draw these constantly. I would make up my own teams and logos and stuff like that. I would create leagues and keep stats and records of games that I made up. And while I didn't know it at the time, I was actually starting a career, I guess, in graphic design, more specifically sports design. So fast forward a few years, I ended up going to Clemson, spent the first few years having a pretty good time. Here's me and some of my buddies. I have no idea why I'm holding that 2x4 in my lap. I don't know what I'm doing with it or about to do with it, but so during my junior year, again, I was having a pretty good time. I was really into music. I started following the band Fish around the country, and one day I went into this place called Tigertown Graphics to make some t-shirts. And they had a help wanted sign up and looking for, design help, looking for a graphic designer. And other than an internship I had a year before, I really didn't have any experience designing anything, but, I thought to myself, I could probably do this. So I went in and I talked to John, the owner, and he was like, yeah, you can work here. I don't care. So I started working at Tigertown Graphics when I wasn't in class. And this is kind of really where I started my journey, so to speak. Started learning how to use Illustrator, use Photoshop, and really getting into kind of the nuts and bolts of it, getting my reps in, stuff like that. I actually did this Tiger Town Graphics logo that's still on the building today. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold here, so I apologize if I'm a little nasally and coughing. And I mean, I think design is just like anything else. I mean, you really got to put the time in and develop your craft and learn how the software works, and really put that time in until, you know, the software and those tools start to become, you know, second nature. It's just some of the work I started out doing. There was another guy there. There was an illustrator that was illustrating some of this stuff. The one on the right there. Just dawned on me that some of you probably weren't even alive in the year 2000. That's comforting. So towards the very end of my time at Clemson, I got what I would call my first big break. It was 2001. We were doing, it was the 20th anniversary of Clemson's 1981 national championship. And so I was scouring the internet, trying to, you know, do some research on anniversary logos. There really wasn't Google Images at the time. It was pretty primitive in terms of finding reference material. It was kind of hard, you know, that didn't really exist. So long story short, I stumbled on this logo design contest to design the 50th anniversary logo for the ACC. And the contest was open to students of ACC schools. And the only problem was the deadline was the next day. So I kind of dropped what I was doing at work and put some ideas together and sent them in. And a few months later, I got a phone call and they said, "You won this logo design contest." I had completely forgotten that I had even entered it. And they're like, "You know, congratulations, you won." I got my name in the local paper. My mom was so proud. I think she bought like a whole stack of these newspapers and sent them to her friends and family and stuff. This was a little feature they did in Clemson World, which is the Clemson alumni magazine. Look at that shit-eating grin I have on my face right there. I mean, I look like the world's like biggest asshole or what, right? Like I thought it was God's gift to graphic design or something. I don't know. I quickly learned that I was not God's gift to graphic design, and I had a lot to learn. So anyway, right out of college, I ended up getting a job at a company called the Collegiate Licensing Company, CLC for short. And CLC is essentially the licensing agent for pretty much every Division I school you can think of. When I was working at Tiger Town, we had to send all our Clemson work through CLC to get the designs approved. So everything that has like a South Carolina logo on it, CLC licenses for the university. They make sure they get the royalties for their trademarks. So I was hired as the in-house graphic designer. Part of my job was managing the style guides of these 200 universities, bowl games, championships, that sort of thing. And South Carolina was a client of mine. It was really just a dream job for somebody right out of college. I can remember my first day there, just seeing just folders and folders full of vector art, which, you know, at the time, it wasn't easy to come by vector art. Now you can kind of just, you know, websites where you can download like rogue versions of it and stuff. But just seeing these, I remember just seeing these folders full of vector art of all these schools was just like I couldn't stand it. This is great. So the other part of my job was we kind of started a logo division, which they didn't really have at the time. And I just thought it would be a really good opportunity to, you know, since we have these relationships with these schools, do some design work. And so, you know, got to spend more time learning Illustrator, honing the craft and that sort of thing. Here's just a kind of sample of the work I did over my time there. And we did other, you know, projects besides logo design, but I quickly realized that was sort of my what I was really passionate about doing. What I did a lot of there was national championship stuff. We would essentially design a logo for every one of our 200 schools that won a national title. I did not like doing not one but two South Carolina baseball championship marks, but I did it anyway because I'm a good guy. Thought about sneaking a tiger paw in there somewhere subliminally, but figure that might not be a good idea if I got caught, so I didn't do that. But this guy had a tattoo I did tattooed on his leg. That's when you know you've really made it, when a guy tattoos your work on his leg. The issue with this is that Kentucky did not win the national championship in 2014. UConn did. So this guy essentially took the one I did from 2012, changed the date before the tournament, swapped out the 8 for a 9. And I guess he thought he was going to will them to win by tattooing this on his body or something, but they didn't win. So he probably looks pretty silly right now. I guess he's got an opportunity coming up in like a couple of years. He could change that 1 to a 2 and make it 2024. I don't know. Not my problem. So in 2012, I decided to leave my job there after 11 years and start my own company called Harley Creative. This is kind of my little home office setup. This is actually the reverse of what you're looking at right now. So if I was to turn the camera around, this is what you'd be seeing. And just gotten to do a lot of cool work for a lot of cool sports brands, NCAA, Little League, Super Bowl 53 when it was here in Atlanta, Atlanta Braves, Sugar Bowl, and Sweetwater Brewing, just to name a few. I've also just started doing some work for the ACC again, so kind of come full circle on that. Here's just some of the design work. Excuse me. There's just a little bit more. Like I said, I've done some work for Sweetwater over the last couple of years on some packaging and marketing materials. This one on the far right was for a collaboration they did on a beer with Be Real from Cypress Hill. And I put this up on Instagram and got a shout out from the band. That was pretty cool. Excuse me. Like I said, I'm getting over a cold, so my throat's closing up on me. And now I'm getting to pay to draw football helmets professionally, which is kind of cool. So then I got a call from these guys a few years ago. All right. And this is where the talk's going to get a little Clemson heavy. It's going to get a little dicey here. So I apologize if I'm offending anybody. But they said this was back in 2018. Right after they won the ACC, I got a call and said, we're going to starting to develop our program for a potential national championship. Would you want to help with the logo? And I said, of course I would love to do that. So I pretty much dove right in. It's funny how, when I was at Tiger Town Graphics, I did nothing but Clemson stuff 24/7. And then got kind of burned out from it. And then taking what was essentially a 17-year break and then having come back full circle, it was just kind of the Clemson just sort of flowed out of me. This is how my artboards typically look on any particular logo or project. When talking about process, I'm always one to want to make it non-destructive. So if I have an idea, I'll make a copy of it just so I can go back and reference it again if I want to, just so it's not gone. That's why the artboard's so messy. What I did with this project too is trying to incorporate some custom type. I just feel like it seems to give it that added touch of customization and attention to detail. And in this case, it was especially important because Clemson's paw hammer font is just utter garbage. I mean, this thing is really, really bad. You can kind of see when you kind of focus in on some of the details here, it's just all over the place. I mean, it's just a real mess. I mean, the heights of the letters aren't even the same. You know, the senders and descenders are all over the place, not the same. It's just a mess. So this is kind of where we ended up after a few initial explorations. And we went back and forth on whether or not to. The game was in Santa Clara, California, which is about an hour and a half from San Francisco. But the playoff that year was billed as the Bay Area. So we went back and forth on do we make a San Francisco reference? Do we not? Ultimately, we decided that was the best route to go. So, but again, even though San Francisco is not really close, we just decided that's how it was going to be. And if you've seen the final logo before, you can kind of see where it's starting to take shape here. And then after a few more rounds of revisions, we're kind of almost there. The one on the right was pretty much it. And then the AD came back and said, well, we need a little bit more orange in there. And I sort of disagreed with him at the time. I was like, I think it's good the way it is, but as all good designers do with clients, you try it their way just to see. And it worked. It was better. He was right. That extra splash of orange really makes it. All right, it's gonna get bad now, guys. All right, I don't want anybody to come away with this saying that I did not warn you. It's gonna get a little graphic here, okay? Ready? Here we go. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Last one, I promise.
Now it's just gratuitous.
Okay, I'll stop. I'm sorry. So I do have a little short process video that I'll show you on kind of how this was built, just so you can kind of see the process. You'll notice that part of this is actually customizing that paw hammer type, like taking it and cleaning it up. So here we go. Let me know if there's some music behind it, so let me know if you can't hear it. But So one more quick thing. As I mentioned, I did get to work on some Final Four logos a few years ago. This was actually part of a much broader project that I did with some of my friends, Joe Bosack and Fraser Davidson and Todd Radom, who are all legends in the sports design space. People always ask me what's been my favorite project to work on, and this, I always mention this one just because I got to do it with my friends, and the friendships that kind of came from this will be with me forever, and that's probably why I love it so much. But one of the tasks we had with this was coming up with a custom typeface for the NCAA, and they're going to use this on all their branding moving forward. And so I came up with 3 or 4, and they didn't end up getting used. And so after a couple of years, it kind of gave me an idea. I said, why not take these custom typefaces and start a little side business with them. So in 2018, Joe and I started a type foundry called Type Drift. And in the 4 years we've been running, we've done more than 28 custom typefaces that are on the site for sale. They've been used by Nashville Predators, the Indianapolis Colts, FanDuel, lots of others. And we're coming up with new stuff all the time. And we thought, since you guys were so gracious for having me come and let you speak today, we'll give you one to play with if you'd like. So if you go to typedrift.com/connect, you can download one of these. It's called Connect, actually, for free, and check it out and use it, do whatever you want with it. I'll probably leave it up there till Friday or so. So if you have a chance this week to go grab it, please do.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, that's kind of all I have today for you. Really, thanks so much for having me. Here's a couple places you can find me online if you want to check out some of my work. Harley-creative.com. Don't go to harleycreative.com. That's a dude that writes scripts for real estate companies and stuff. So that's not me.
I want to ask you, you brought up Fraser, and that was going to be one of my questions. Do you work with other creatives in your work, and how, and can you talk a little bit about that, maybe those processes with those projects, working with other people, and what do they do? What kind of people are you working with?
Yeah, I mean, it all depends on the project. I mean, I've done some projects where people's different strengths are used for different things. Fraser's he's a great designer, but he's a great animator too. So he's done some animation work for some of the stuff I've done. So for instance, when I did the Super Bowl host committee, he did a really awesome animation reveal of it when they revealed it to the public. But for the stuff like the Final Four project, that was 5 of us. It was Joe's project, and he kind of hired the other 4 of us to help him. And it was really a collaborative process in the truest sense of the word. It was that first one that we did, the one for Houston, the one with the space theme. I mean, that was really, honestly, all 5 of us touched that in some way. It wasn't like one person's idea and the other people's ideas just didn't get used. It was, I don't remember whose idea it was initially, but each of us had a small part in that one. So that was a true collaborative logo design. I don't know that that always happens that way all the time in collaborate. Usually it's like, oh, that person's idea is the best, we're going to use that one, and then that's how it goes. I do have a girl that works part-time for me that does some work for me, and we collaborate on certain types of things. I've done a little bit more work for Joe in recent years, so it kind of just all depends on the situation. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and I mean, you're also handing off these files to someone who may or may not be doing print work. They might also be doing work, right? So can you speak a little to that?
As far as like, say the first part of your question again.
So, like, how is it, or what kind of adjustments to your workflow do you make for somebody or do you make for a project where you're handing something off to someone who's doing animation? Like Fraser does a lot of animation.
Right. So for that particular one, I developed like a style guide for that. So it was not only the logo, it was like some supplementary pieces, patterns, and things like that. The nice thing about Fraser's so unbelievably talented that you can just hand stuff to him, and he usually does it over himself because he's so good at it. But like something like that, I handed him kind of that package, and he took like some. I'll send you a link, and you can look at the or it's actually on my website. If you go to my website and go to that project, it's the animations on there. So I handed him, basically it was a background of like like a map of Atlanta, like streets and things like that. And he basically took that and animated it to be almost like you were going through the city on the streets, like them winding around and stuff like that. So for something like that, it's getting it as far as you can, I guess, as far as your vision will take it. And sometimes when you have somebody that's as talented as Fraser is, they can just take it and run with it. Other times you have to really got people that aren't design. I mean, I work with a lot of people that aren't designers too, that are just kind of like marketing people or social media people, where you got to provide everything pretty much, and go, here's the Instagram file, here's the Facebook graphic, that sort of thing. So and other times I work with people that are more savvy, that can they can create different sized things for what they need. And sometimes I got to do everything. So,
right. So you're sort of handing over the entire system. When you're developing brand guides for a project, what are I know that they can change, right? The elements inside of the brand guide can have there can be many different things dependent on the project. But are there any particular things that you always make sure for these students to hear?
I mean, you have your standard usage, clear space, don't stretch it. Here's the colors, here's the fonts. Here's ways to use it, ways not to use it, that sort of thing. I mean, all that stuff is pretty standard across the board. Sometimes you have to get a little bit more in depth depending on depending on the range of assets that you're providing to them. I don't do a whole lot of projects that have a ton of assets. It's usually like one or two logos. I just finished doing something for a high school athletic association here in Georgia, and that was like 4 logos. Not a lot of patterns or anything. It's like here's how to use the logos, here's how to not use them. But you talk about huge corporate rebrands where there's patterns and millions of different uses. That's a whole nother can of worms. I try not to get into projects that are that big anymore. So
I mean, the Super Bowl project is kind of huge.
Yeah, again, there wasn't a ton of assets with the actual game. It was. So what I did was on the host side, the local host side, Atlanta. So their main objectives were getting volunteers for the game, educating people on how the weekend's going to kind of go, that sort of thing, preparing the city for the game. It wasn't the game side, which is the NFL, which is all the fan fests and hotels and branding all over the city. That's a huge undertaking. Where mine was more just like I said, sort of like the Georgia thing I just mentioned, a couple different logos. Here's how to use them. The thing with that too is I was also acting as their in-house designer for that period of time. So I was doing a lot of the work myself. So there wasn't a whole lot to send out to people because I was doing all the work. So I didn't really need to do that. But we did do a style guide and with some patterns and usage and stuff like that, just for people that weren't using what we were providing to them.
So I have a question. So recently I was working on a logo for the soccer team, and I actually remember looking at some of your work as inspiration. I remember looking at the Clemson logo and like the final logo that you did. So my question is, when is it appropriate to bring like sports logo traditions? Because a lot of times, if you have a different idea and you maybe, but like every other one is like a batch. When is it okay to like release like conventions?
That's a good question. I mean, I think it's again, it depends on the situation. I mean, you're right that sports does typically have a certain aesthetic to it. I think that's changing more recently. I think people are pushing those boundaries more and more each day. I mean, a good example of that is kind of what the Super Bowl is doing now. It's not your typical sort of badge type thing where they're incorporating a lot. This one in particular, they're incorporating like a lot of imagery into the logo in a interesting way. So you said you were, say again, you were doing something for the soccer team, did you say?
Yeah, we were designing a logo for the coaches like youth camp. And the challenge with that one was incorporating all the tech they wanted to. So it was like the whole title of the camp was really long. It was like Shelley's South Carolina soccer school.
Yeah.
All that and very simplistic, and they didn't want to have a bunch of things going on. So, and they didn't give me any guidance. They just like, oh, make a logo, which was a really good challenge.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, I mean, I think as creatives, you ultimately you want to be able to kind of let your mind run free. But I prefer having boundaries sometimes, because sometimes like in the the scenario you just described where somebody's like, just do a logo. It's like, okay, well, let's talk about what you want, because I've had projects where somebody says just do a logo and I nail it, and then I've had projects where they say just do a logo and we're going back and forth for months. I think it's okay to ask for clarification sometimes and kind of push people to sort of explain their vision for it. The Super Bowl logo is a really good example of that. I mean, we went back and forth for months and months and months on that, just going in the completely wrong direction. It had a lot to do with the person who was heading that up at the time, who was ultimately fired after a while. To where, so they kept saying, we need this image, we need this one iconic representation of an Atlanta. And I kept trying to explain to them that there wasn't one, like, it's not like if you were to do something in New York City where it's, you got the Statue of Liberty, you have the Empire State Building, all those iconic type things. And Atlanta is basically peaches, and it's maybe the skyline or maybe the stadium. And so we went back and forth through all those things, and he kept saying to me, we got to find that one thing. And I kept going, there isn't one. I don't know how else to explain it to you, So going back to I don't know if this is getting to the answer of your question, but I think it's, if you're sort of confused as to where I would push them a little bit and ask, if it's just a matter of incorporating a lot of type into it, or a lot of, words, go back to them and say, is there a way we can simplify this. I just had a situation recently where it was something like that. It was a lot of words. And I said, is there a way we can shorten this up? Because it's too much. And the guy's like, yeah, you're right. It's too wordy. And we ended up shortening it. So that might be one option for you. Or two, sometimes I just take the initiative myself and go, what if we did it this way? And just show them. Because a lot of times people like that are more responsive to you showing them rather than to just keep asking them, because they don't really know. So if you went back, if you had an idea for something that was simplifying it in a certain way, and you went back to and you did it and you showed them and said, this is what I think we should do, they might go, yeah, that's great. That's what we should be doing. Let's do that. So I would encourage you to use your best judgment on that.
You said that you started designing on the junior year. I'm not familiar. So is junior year the second or the third?
So yeah, it's generally the third year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what were you majoring in?
I was a graphic communications major, which is not, it sounds like a fun design major, but it was a really bad name for it. It was actually like printing and like printing. They still have it there. It's a great program for somebody that wants to get into the printing industry. It's one of the best schools for that in the country, but I wasn't interested in printing. So it was a lot of learning about like flexography and offset and screen printing and like the technical side of it, like taking classes about inks. I didn't care for that at all. Like we would take a field trip to like a corrugated packaging place. And I was like, I got to a point where I just felt like I needed to be done with school. So I just kind of sucked it up and did it. But I got that job when I was like a junior. So that kind of helped me a lot. Because if I didn't have that, I don't know what I would have been doing. I wouldn't have gotten that fulfillment of the design part of it, So I was lucky that a lot of success. I'm a firm believer in being at the right place at the right time. That's not a great advice to give to somebody, to say you need to be in the right place at the right time, but it's a lot of my success particularly is being in the right place at the right time. If I hadn't walked into that place and seen a sign that said help wanted, I might be in a completely different situation right now. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Yeah. I have a question. So how did you transition from like working for a company to actually like making your own? Because I imagine this must be like a very intimidating process. So how did you like?
You mean how I transitioned from my job to starting my own company? Is that what you're asking? I mean, it wasn't easy. It was one of those things. I worked at my company for 11 years, and I always told myself I would know when it's time to leave. And we went through a bunch of managerial changes. The company was sold to IMG, which is a huge marketing company. It was cool for a while, and then there were some managerial changes and some decisions that I just didn't agree with, and it was just like, you know what, it's time to leave. And I don't know if you can tell, I'm not a real corporate kind of guy. So I was like, I don't know that I want to go get another job somewhere. And thankfully at that company, I met a ton of people that are well connected in other areas of sports. And a lot of those people left too. So when I first left, the four top people at that company all left and started their own gig. And when I kind of hinted that I was thinking about leaving, they're like, well, we can throw you some work. And so that was kind of the first time when I was like, maybe this is the right time to do it. It was scary. My wife wasn't completely sold on that happening, but I was just like, I gotta do it now. And I just been really, really lucky to be able to work with a lot of cool people. But to me, it's the word of mouth is the best sort of advertising you can do. I don't market myself at all. Like people say, how do you get business? And I say the phone rings and I pick it up. But I let other people kind of do that work for me. I'm a firm believer, if you go somewhere and you do great work for somebody, they're going to notice, and then they're going to want to work with you again. And that's kind of what I did at my old company. A lot of people left, and they're like, oh, we need a graphic designer. I remember TJ, he's doing his own thing now. Let's call him. Everybody needs graphic design. I don't think it's excuse me, something that's ever going to not be needed, especially digitally now. I mean, it's just everywhere. So, but as far as making the transition, I mean, it was, you know, a little scary there for the first few months, but, you know, you just kind of find a way to make it work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess with the way that like kind of graphic design has changed and evolved, like today's time, what would you say for someone that would want to get like their foot in the door in sports design and just logo design in general?
Sorry, I missed the last part of that. Can you mind just repeating it?
Yeah, how would you suggest for someone to kind of get their foot in the door of sports design in like today's day and time in the state that graphic design is a field is that?
In sports design in particular, or just kind of?
Sports design, just kind of logo design in general.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many more resources now than when I was starting. You know, there wasn't social media, there wasn't Dribble, there wasn't Behance, there wasn't any of those things. So it was a lot harder to get your work out there. Now that, I mean, there's so many resources out there. So I would recommend, if there's an area that you're really passionate about, to start doing that work. You know, if South Carolina is having some sort of sports anniversary, if it's, you know, if you're coming up on the baseball team's 10th anniversary, go to say, make a logo. Go, I made this. It's so easy to get in touch with those people now. Like I said, when I was coming up, you couldn't find the creative director of Major League Baseball, or it didn't even exist at schools for the most part. There was no design department at you know, sports teams. Now you find the person on Twitter and you send them a message and say, hi, I'm so-and-so, here's my work. They may respond, they may not, but at least the opportunity is there. So I would recommend, if there's something that you like to do, start doing it and reach out to people. You know, if the work is good, people are gonna respond. It's I think it's a pretty easy, it's instant feedback, so to speak, you know. And if you're passionate about it, keep doing it. My buddy Fraser, who we keep talking about, I mean, he started by kind of doing that, like right when like Dribble and that first started, he was just making stuff. And he's a different example because he's so talented and he's just an amazing like person and an amazing designer. But I mean, he started by just drawing stuff for fun, and people are like, wow, this dude is incredible. And then, you know, he went on to do stuff for Nike. I mean, he did the Georgia Bulldog head, he did the UConn Husky. He's done a ton of stuff like that, but it all came from just putting it out there, you know. So, you know, the resources are there to put that work out. So I would say just start doing it if you enjoy it, you know, when you have the time. And and South Carolina's design department might be a good starting place, you know. If they have, I don't know if they have internships there or not for that sort of thing, or they have like, you know, junior positions open, but go, hey, if you need somebody, I'll help you for free, you know, while I'm going to school here. You know, I mean, the opportunity is always there. It's just about how much time you want to put into it, and you know, just get your hands dirty.
Is Fraser's is it Cub still Cub Studio?
Cub Studio, yeah.
Not Studio.
I'm sure he would come on and talk to you. I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but I'm sure he would.
so I feel like I'm coming full circle. So when I first developed the course back at University of Louisville, he was the first person I had come and talk, and that was via Skype.
Mhm.
It's like exactly the same way, but he was the
Yeah.
first person. Now, I'm finally having you talk. We
Yep.
were right there near Lexington, Kentucky, where Adam is. And I just felt like, we have all these sports designers, and we need to have this conversation, because often my students are working within the internships here at USD. They are working with the sports design, and they have a lot of questions about it, but it's I don't know if I want to call it a niche, but it's certainly a category of design that we don't talk about nearly as much in
Yeah.
school. We
Well,
talk a
it's-
lot about theory, but that is something we don't often talk about.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly grown into something much bigger than it ever was when I was, just coming out of college. There was a handful of people that did sports design. Joe and Todd being two of those people. But I mean, now it's an industry in and of itself. It's teams are finding that, if you I'm not talking about like large established universities, but smaller schools are realizing that if you can rebrand your university, you're going to sell a lot of merchandise because people want that new stuff. So that's part of it too. There's also a downside to that, where it's like companies like Nike want to rebrand big schools every 10 years for the same reason, because they can make a lot of money doing that. But yeah, and even like the digital part of it now, I mean, every professional team has a design department. A lot of college teams have design departments. I mean, it's almost mandatory at this point. If you don't have it, then you're behind. And that, 10 years ago, that didn't exist.
Right. It's so true. Where do you see things going in your industry?
I mean, the digital part is just growing every day. It'll be interesting to see how the whole NFT thing affects this. I still don't understand NFTs. I'm not here to say I don't think they're going to be kind of the next thing. I just don't understand why somebody would pay it $1.2 million for a JPEG. But saying that, I think that's probably the future. I mean, other than that, I mean, like the social media part of sports, and that real time, like during games. I mean, that's a thing now. Like I said, if you're not updating your fans in real time during the game on social media, then you're behind, because everybody's doing it now.
So this is a conversation that we had on Monday in this class. One of our students, or a few of our students, are interested in sports design in this class, and we started talking about how the viewers who are streaming the game in whatever way they're viewing it, the viewers who might have their phone near the screen that they're watching it should be able to bridge the experience of watching something on screen and also using their phone to find out more information, or as a takeaway, an extension of programming. But simultaneously, I feel that way about the experience inside of an arena, or inside of at the court, or wherever it is you're at the game. How do we use like environmental graphic design and digital, how do we bridge the real space with digital applications? And I just can't help but feel like that's part of the landscape of this too, right? That it must be going in that direction.
And it already is. I mean, I know a couple of guys I used to work with. They work for I can't remember the name of the company, but they do like real time like ticket upgrades and like games and stuff within a live setting. So like if you go to a game and you're up in the second deck, like they'll have a contest to where you could move down to like the floor, and that's all mobile. So all sorts of things like that. I mean, like people are already doing it. I'm not super familiar with that part of it, but that's certainly one area that it's going for sure.
The experience, what that experience looks like and how.
Absolutely, because there's such a, we've made it so luxurious to be at home and watch games now, and get up and get a drink whenever we want. We can go to the bathroom whenever we want without a line, and just sit there. To quite honestly, I prefer watching the games on TV now. I got a big TV at my house, and like it's really easy. I don't have to go to the game, and I got to park. I'm gonna pay $50 to park. So I think they have a real challenge of trying to get people, especially with COVID now. I mean, like there's a real challenge to get people to come to games, and I think it gets harder every day, every season to do that. And so they've got to find ways to engage fans that decide to come to the game.
That sounds like a really good problem for one of these students to solve. It does. It does. Sounds like a really good problem. Other questions from the group?
I have more of a suggestion of a project, like for everybody to look up that, because I'm from Brazil, and there's like the biggest soccer team there is called Flamengo. And a professor from my home university did like the redesign of their logo, their whole visual identity. And I just looked it up, and they have he has it on Behance in English, and it's a really interesting project because it's a really traditional team, and he redesigned their logo in a way that it's way more modern, and yeah, it's a really interesting project.
I didn't understand. I'll send it also.
Okay.
Other Jackson.
Yeah, okay, when you're working on a new logo or a new project in general, and you're kind of struggling to find ideas, find inspiration, what are some ways that you use to create those creative juices?
It's a good question. I used to do a lot of looking around at other for inspiration, looking for inspiration from other people's work, and I stopped doing that because I found myself, not that I was copying it, but it wasn't coming like organically, I've tried to start teaching myself that, and I still get into design blocks for sure all the time, but I've tried to sort of teach myself to that it's going to be okay. Like I usually figure it out, and to not, when I do have that block, not to get frustrated and go, well, I'm never going to get this done. That's part of it. That's part of, like, I've been meditating for like 3 years, and it's kind of a similar sort of philosophy there. So I told myself, I've been doing this a while. I'm going to figure it out. Sometimes it just comes to me. Sometimes I will try and look to other things like nature, or listen to music, or look at people's work sometimes, but not something that's so similar to where I would be obliged to copy them. I hope I'm answering your question, because I think that it's probably a little different for somebody that's been doing it for a long time than somebody that's fairly new. I think you approach it in different ways. When you have the experience of doing it for a long time, then you can kind of rely on your experience sometimes, rather than looking for it in a visual way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question or not, but that's how I approach it these days. I have been doing a lot more. I got a new iPad recently with it, and been drawing more. I used to draw a lot, like I showed you, football helmets and stuff. But I've been drawing a lot more, and that's helped a lot too. I didn't used to like to draw. I've never been a sketcher. I know a lot of people are sketchers. I'm not a sketcher. I've always just started in Illustrator, but I've been doing that a little bit more, and that seemed to help too. And just not just drawing logos, but just like drawing other things. And that started to help me a little bit too. And I've been doing that more as like a therapeutic type of thing rather than a work thing, but kind of goes hand in hand, you know?
All right. So on the heels of that advice, if you had one bit of advice to give current students right now, what might that be?
That's a loaded question.
Sorry, I'm not sorry.
Okay. I think as what I said before, like if you're passionate about a certain type of, whether it's sports or it's corporate branding or it's layout, whatever the case may be, just start doing it. You know, even if you don't have to be paid for it. It doesn't have to be an assignment. Just do it because you enjoy doing it, and you'll get better at it, and you'll start finding new things. You'll start finding out where your strengths are, and it just in the process of doing. I'm still learning things. I've been doing this for 20 something years, and I'm still learning all the time. And that only comes from putting the work in and just repetition and just doing it every day. You know, there's no easy button. You know, it's kind of like a musician. Like you can't just play your first gig at Madison Square Garden. You got to put the time in and work and play small bars and until you get to where it comes more naturally. So my advice would be to, whatever you're passionate about doing, start doing it, even if it's not for a particular purpose, if it's just for your own enjoyment or, just to get better at it.
Like Andrew Hawkeye will rebrand like Southwest for no reason, right? And
Right.
Right. Yeah. And
Yeah.
now he just got a gig with Adobe because of all the work
Yeah.
that he's
Right. And I would say don't in this kind of, and again, I'm a little older than some of you guys, so I'm in a little bit different headspace, I guess, but it doesn't always have to be for clicks. I know that in our society today, we do a lot of stuff for clicks and likes, and it doesn't always have to be for that. It can just be because you want to do it. It doesn't have to be because you want to put it on Dribble and have a bunch of people go, oh, this is great. It can just be, you don't even have to share it. Like the stuff I'm doing, I shared some of it just because I'm like, hey, this is fun. Look what I just learned how to do. But like a lot of it just sits there.
Well, thank you for spending an hour with us and answering our questions.
You're welcome.
In particular, that process video is really valuable. So that was great.
All right, guys. Later.